thank God together and worship him, but we can't. The church is too big. It's grown too large. So we said, well, let's rent the United Center where the Chicago Bulls play basketball, and we'll just use that as an opportunity to worship and thank God. And so the night of the 20th anniversary came, and people began to come into the United Center, 20,000 people. And as they walked in one by one, they were given a little flashlight, like a little keychain. And it said, reminiscent of the verse we just heard, it said, light of the world on it. And it's a little flashlight that you can light up, kind of a dorky thing, but you know, a little souvenir, right? So everybody came in, and for 2 hours, we just thanked God and worshiped God for what he'd done in 20 years. But then something amazing happened. A young woman named Nancy Beach, who'd been just a little teenager when this church started, she got up and she said, we're going to do something special before we end the evening. What we're going to do is we're going to turn off the lights of the United Center, and I'm going to count to 3. And when I hit 3, if God used this church to bring you to faith in Jesus Christ, then I want you to light that little light we gave you as a souvenir, okay? And we said, okay. So we turned the lights off in the United Center. They go off in chunks. Ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk. Pretty soon, it is pitch black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. 20,000 people in this arena, and you could see nothing. And Nancy says, okay, I'm going to count to 3. And when I hit 3, if you came to faith through this ministry, I want you to light your light. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. And for a moment, there was nothing. And then, boom! Thousands and thousands of lights went on all over the arena. Just, like on a dark night where you just see constellations everywhere. Thousands of lights lit up, each representing a soul saved. And there was a gasp and spontaneous worship for what God had done. But that's not the amazing thing. The amazing thing happened next, because we wanted to capture this on film. And so we got invited a photographer on the stage. It was still all dark, all these lights glowing, and he had a panoramic lens on his camera. And he only had time to take 1 picture. And so he snapped the shutter. Of course, he didn't use a flash. He snapped the shutter. Now, here's a question. How fast do you think that shutter clicked? By 1/30th of a second? 1/60th of a second? Whatever that split second that shutter clicked on the camera on the stage, somebody else on the main floor of the auditorium wanted to take their own picture. So they used a little flash camera. They took a picture, and because that flash on the camera on the main floor at random happened to flash at the same split second that the shutter clicked on the camera on the stage, a little bit of the light from that other camera registered on the film on the camera on the stage. You see what I'm saying? We couldn't have replicated that if we tried a week. A couple days later, we were developing the film. And as we developed the film, we looked at it. Oh, look at this. Isn't this amazing? Look at all those thousands of lights, just points of light in the darkness. Wait a minute. What's this? And in the lower left-hand corner of that photograph, out of 20,000 people in that auditorium that night, that random flash of light from that other camera had lit up one face. And it was the face of Dr. B. This humble little theology professor who God had used to cast the vision for a church that would reach the unchurched. And as we blew up that picture to get a better look at it, we could see that Dr. B was looking around at these thousands of lights, and he was weeping like a baby. Why? Because he knew at that moment it was all worth it. 20 years in the trenches of ministry, 20 years of countless hours of volunteering at the church, of late night meetings that went on forever, of discipline issues that were conundrums, of no money where you have to give every penny that you had. 20 years of ministry was worth it for this, because he realized he was a link in the chain that God had used to lead every one of those people to faith in Jesus Christ. He was a link in the chain. And here's my message to you. At that moment, God gave Dr. B a gift that he has not given you graduates. It's as if God said to Dr. B, you know, you're getting to be an old man. You don't have much time left in this world. Before you leave this world, I just want to show you a sliver of the impact that I have had with your life. He's not given that gift to you. And as you sit here today at your graduation, you have no idea how much God has used you and how much as you go out into whatever calling God has put on your heart, you have no idea how much he will use you as salt and as light. You don't know, you're working at some corporation and you go through a personal crisis. Your spouse is sick. Your child is sick. And you don't realize it, but the people in the office are watching you and they're watching how you react. And one of them moves away. He goes to Cleveland somewhere. You never see him again. And 10 years later, he goes through a crisis. His wife is deathly ill. And he thinks back and he says, what do I do? And he remembers you, how he watched you lean on Jesus Christ in that crisis. And he gets on his knees and he receives Jesus Christ. And you never knew. And you never know if, you're volunteering at the youth ministry at your church. And you got these group of junior high school kids, and they're a wild bunch. They're hardly listening to you. And you think, well, what impact am I really having? And yet one of those kids, the quiet one in the back, what you said has resonated with him. And he goes off to college. And he's a junior in college when he comes to faith in Jesus Christ. And you know what? He can trace it back to the teaching that you gave in that little group. But you didn't know. And he joins Campus Crusade, and they hold a big outreach event. They reach 65 people in that outreach event who commit their lives to Jesus Christ. 5 of them go on to be pastors of churches that end up reaching thousands of people. 3 of them go off in the mission field. 1 goes to China and is instrumental in opening up a whole province of China. And you know what? You never knew. And you don't know, you get married, you raise your kids as best you can, and by God's grace, they come to faith in Jesus Christ. And during their lifetime, your children lead 5 people to Christ. And those 5 people lead 15 people. And those 15 people lead 60 people. And it ripples down through history for hundreds of years. And you never knew. Or you're preaching on a Sunday at your church and you articulate the gospel with as much passion, as precision as you possibly can. You pour your heart out and you call for an invitation. You call for people to respond. Not one person steps forward, and you go home and you tell your spouse, why am I doing this? Nobody responded again, and you feel defeated and discouraged. But what you didn't know is there's a guy in that 14th row, and you know what? He hates you at this moment because he feels so convicted about what you've said. And he leaves and he never comes back to your church. But that sense of conviction is carried with him. And he ends up moving. He goes on to San Francisco. And years later, he comes to faith. And you were a link in the chain and you never knew. And then 20 years later, his son goes to a college, a secular college. His son, who's a Christian now, and leads a revival at that college, and hundreds come to faith. And one of them writes a book in which the gospel is articulated in 21st century terms, and hundreds and thousands of people read that book, and countless people come to faith, and you never knew. Do you get what I'm saying? I mean, today, as you prepare to emerge as an ambassador for Jesus Christ into whatever field he's calling you into, you have no idea how God will use you as a link in the chain to lead people to Christ. But here is my prayer for you, that someday when you are in heaven, and it's going to be just an average routine day in heaven, which is to say, just bliss. But it's going to be a special day because it's going to be your day. And Jesus is going to walk up to you and he's going to say, you never knew. You never knew how many times I, in my sovereignty, chose to use you as a link in the chain to lead someone to heaven. But today is your day. Today is your day to find out. And so